Hi everyone, and welcome to another week of Kids Church Online. It's great that you could be with us today, and I'm just looking around here. I think Frank's been doing some tidying up. Frank, what are you up to?
Hi Michelle, hi everyone. I've just been doing some cleaning up and sorting some things out because I don't use this anymore. I've got new ones.
Oh, let's see what you've got here, Frank. You've got some CDs.
Yeah, I don't really use them anymore. I listen to music online now.
Oh, okay, so you don't need these things anymore, Frank. Well, you've got something new that does the same job but better.
Yeah, that's true. The CDs were good for listening to music, but they would get scratched or broken, and then we couldn't use them anymore. When I listen to music online, I don't need to worry about any of that.
And what about this phone, Frank? Does this work?
No, I use my mobile phone now. This one's not connected to anything.
Right, so I think our story today, Frank, is a little bit like this. We're going to hear about how Solomon built something new and impressive to replace an older version of it.
I remember what we learned about Solomon last week, Michelle. He became a king when his father, David, died. David was a good king after God's own heart, and Solomon wanted to be a good king too.
That's right, Frank. And do you remember what Solomon did so that he would know how to be a good king?
He asked God for wisdom so that he would be able to rule God's people well.
That's right. Good remembering, Frank. God gave Solomon wisdom, and the people saw how wise he was when he settled the argument between the two women who were fighting about who the baby belonged to. Now, God also made a promise to David about Solomon. Do you know what it was?
God had promised that Solomon would also have riches and a long life and defeat his enemies.
That's true, but even before Solomon was born, God promised that David's son would be the one to build a temple for God.
Where did the Israelites worship God if they didn't have a temple?
Well, do you remember, Frank, when we learnt about God giving Moses instructions about how to build the tabernacle? It was a special tent where God would dwell with his people. Before the Israelites came to the promised land, they were moving around in the desert, so they needed to be able to worship God wherever they were.
So that's why they had a tent and not a building in one place.
That's right. And the tabernacle had a special area inside where the ark was kept. Only one person, a priest, was allowed to go into this area, the most holy place, one day a year. The ark was like God's throne.
And the people couldn't get too close to God and his throne because he is holy and can't be near sin.
The priests would make sacrifices for their sin before they entered the tabernacle. But now the Israelites are settled in the promised land. They're not moving around anymore. David was a good king, and he had wanted to build a temple for God. But God promised that David's son would be the one to build the temple.
So did Solomon build the temple? Sounds like a big job.
Yes, he did. And it was a very big job. It took 7 years to complete the temple in Jerusalem. Solomon used the finest materials, timber and stone, the best workers and craftsmen, and lots of gold.
Gold? I have a hat just for that.
Oh. Now, the inner sanctuary, the part of the temple where the ark would be kept, was all covered with gold.
Like my hat.
Wow, that is a fantastic hat, Frank. Now, when the temple was finished, Solomon gathered the elders of Israel, the heads of all the families and tribes, and the chiefs of the families in Jerusalem, so that they could bring up the Ark of the Covenant to the temple. It was a special celebration. The priests took the ark and they brought it into the most holy place in the temple.
That's the part covered with gold.
Exactly. All the Israelites celebrated and they made lots and lots of sacrifices to God.
What a great celebration. What happened next, Michelle?
When the priests had put the ark into the most holy place and then they came out of the temple, God's presence filled the temple.
Wow. The cloud filled the temple just like in the tabernacle. God is dwelling with his people.
And then Solomon prayed and thanked God for keeping his promise to live with his people forever.
And the people celebrated. And they must have been so happy to know that God had kept his promises.
They were happy, Frank, and now they had a permanent place where people could come from far away to worship God at the temple. Well, it's time for Kids Church Catch-Up now. Let's see who we're meeting today.
Hi, I'm Charlotte and I am part of the KFC group at Kids Church. The best thing about Stage 4 restrictions is that I get to be at home with my family and play with my dogs. The worst thing about Stage 4 restrictions is that I don't get to go to church and see everyone. My faith in Jesus has encouraged me because I know he never changes, although many other things change.
I have a question about the temple, Michelle.
What's that, Frank?
The temple sounds amazing. Is it still there? Can we go to Jerusalem and see it?
No, Frank. The temple was destroyed when Israel was taken over by their enemies. This was all part of God's plan, though. And when the Israelites returned to their land, they rebuilt the temple.
I knew that Jesus went to the temple, so it must have still been there.
After Jesus had gone back to heaven, the temple was destroyed again.
But does that mean that God is not with his people? That does not sound right.
God is with his people. When Jesus came, he said he was the new temple of God, the place where God was present. As the Son of God, Jesus is himself the real presence of God. And Jesus spoke about his body as a temple.
I remember this. When Jesus cleared the temple, he said to the Pharisees, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it in 3 days." They thought he was talking about the building.
But Jesus was talking about his body as a temple. It was destroyed by death on the cross, but rebuilt 3 days later when he was raised to life. Jesus is the new and greater temple. Just as people went to the temple to meet with God, we can meet with God when we come to know and love Jesus.
So that's why the temple building wasn't rebuilt again. God's people did not need the building to meet with God. They meet with him through Jesus. I have another question.
What's your question, Frank?
How did God fit into the temple or even the tabernacle? Isn't God bigger than that?
You're right, Frank. God can't be contained in a tent or in a temple. The ark and the cloud were signs that God was with his people, as well as warning them that he was dangerously holy and that people could only approach him in a certain way.
Now, we can come to God through Jesus, not a special building.
That's right. We're not able to go to our church building at the moment, but that doesn't mean that we can't meet with God. All people can come to him by trusting in Jesus. Let's pray about that now. Here's Bronwyn.
Hi everyone. Hope you're having a good weekend and looking forward to the start of the school holidays at the end of the week. But today we're learning about Solomon's temple. And a few weeks ago, my family and I decided to build the Millennial Temple, which is from Ezekiel chapter 40. Would you like to have a look? Here it is. as you can see, it's made up of a lot of different sections. This one here is the Holy of Holies. And if you look inside, you'll see where they would have kept the Ark of the Covenant. That's in the green section. And at the back, here we've got 2 ovens for cooking. I think the priests would have liked their food. We've got storage areas for the priests, 2 pillars, the altar, and here at the side are 2 doors where you can come in. And you can also come in at the front, up here. And all the way around the outside, of course, we've got the walls. And if you look from the top, I wonder what shape you see the temple makes. Maybe that's something to think about. Well, it took us a little while to build this temple out of Duplo, but it would take a lot longer to build a big temple out of bricks, wouldn't it? So aren't we lucky that we don't have to build a temple to be able to come and talk to God or to come before Him? And we don't need a special place like the Holy of Holies to keep God. No, we can keep Jesus right here in our own hearts, and we can come to God anytime. So let's do that now in prayer. And today I've chosen an acrostic prayer, and I wonder as we pray if you might know what word has inspired this prayer today. So let's bow our hearts and bow our heads in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for your unchanging love for me. Even when we can't meet together in a building, your people can always come to you through Jesus, and we can still love you and others every day, wherever we are. Amen. Well, if you think you know what word inspired my acrostic prayer today, do let Michelle know, and she might just have something special for you if you're the first one to let her know. Well, have a great week, everyone.
Well, now it's time for our memory verse. I hope you've been practicing. How about you, Frank? Have you been practicing? Do you remember where our memory verse is from?
It's from Proverbs.
Right.
9.
Yes.
15?
No. Proverbs chapter 9 verse 10.
10. I was about to say it.
That's it. And do you remember how it goes, Frank?
I remember a bit of it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of... What is it?
What did Solomon have?
Wisdom.
That's right. That's our first part. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding.
I was about to say it, Michelle.
Okay, let's try it together one last time, Frank, okay? Have you got it now?
I've got it.
Okay, everyone, let's say it together.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding.
Proverbs
chapter 9, verse 10.
Well done, Frank.
Thanks,
think
Michelle.
you need to practice a little bit more.
I think I need to too.
And if you think you've worked it out, if you think you can say the memory verse well, send me a video and you could be in our Kids Church Online video next week. But for now, it's time for craft. Get all your stuff together and we'll get started. Well, now it's time for craft. Now, the last few weeks, our craft has been pretty easy, hasn't it? Mostly just colouring, nothing too challenging. Well, all that changes today. Today we've got some pretty tricky craft. So younger kids, you're probably going to need some help for a grown-up for some of this craft, okay? I don't want you to hurt yourself, and I don't want you to wreck your craft trying to do it by yourself. You might just need a little bit of help. So You've seen what we need. Let's start with our first craft. What you need is this sheet, okay? And this is enough for 2 people. 2 people can use this sheet. So the first thing you can do is cut it in half. So you're only using the part that you need. Now this is a picture of what the ark that they took into the temple, we think what it looked like. Now I've decorated mine, I've coloured it in all gold because it was made of gold, and I've put some extra glitter glue around the edges. You can decorate your one however you like and with whatever you've got at home. So that's our first step, colouring and decorating today. Then our next step is you'll need 2 pieces of paper, coloured paper perhaps, red or blue or purple coloured paper. I've got tissue wrap here. I hope it's going to work well with tissue wrap. And what we're going to need to do with both of these pieces of paper is fold it back and forth like you would for a fan. So you fold one bit up and then one bit down, and then flip it over and fold it up, and then flip it over and fold it down, and keep going until you've done the whole piece, and the whole thing will look like just a very narrow piece. Now you're going to need to do that for both of your pieces of paper. That's one done. Let's see how quickly I can do this one. Up and down we go. Try, if you're using tissue paper like I am, do be careful when you're folding that you don't rip it, because it's pretty easy to rip. So, all right, here we go. Now we've got our 2 pieces of paper. Fold it up so they're nice and thin. Now these are going to become the curtain that was in front of the ark, because like you know, we couldn't just walk into the temple and see the ark. That was like God's throne. You could not get that close to it. So it was protected behind a curtain. Now the next thing you'll need is a skewer. Now this is the part where you're going to have to be pretty careful. Okay, what we're going to do is poke our skewer carefully through all these layers of paper, and then move our curtain along. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other one. Poking it through carefully, little ones, make sure you get a grown-up to help you do this, and be careful not to rip your paper. Now, we can carefully spread our curtains out along those folds, sort of try and straighten it out a bit. It's a little bit tricky, but not too hard. Do it gently so it looks kind of like curtains. It's coming together, isn't it? I think it is. All right, here we go. Now we've spread our curtains out. Oh, it looks fantastic. I'm just gonna, now, I don't want to hurt myself on this pokey bit, so I'm going to chop it off and hope it doesn't fly off and hit Alex. Missed him. All right, now we've got our curtains and we've got our ark. Now our next step is to tape the curtains along the top. We're going to tape our stick along the top of the page. Where these crosses are, that's where we're going to tape it down. So I'm going to put that on there, hoping taping will work. Here's my tape. One. Now I've lost the end of the tape. No, found it again. That's okay. Taping on the other end. And here we have our most holy place, and you can push the curtains aside to see what's in there. It's the ark. And then close them up again. That worked really well. Okay, that's our first bit of craft. Now we'll move on to activity B. You're going to need 2 sheets for this one. One that looks like this. Everyone needs one that looks like this. And there's also one that looks like this. Now this is enough for 4 people. Okay, so you don't need one of these each. You only need one between 4. You can see I've already coloured in 2 of the arcs down there. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut those out because I don't need the rest of them. But in your family, you might be able to share them with your brother or sister. All right, here's our first bit. Now again, we've got this picture of the ark. So you're going to want to colour it in and to decorate it and make it look fancy. You might say, why do I need 2? That's because we're going to fold it in half and make a double-sided arc. Here we go. So arc, there's another one on the other side. So we folded it down the middle and then we're going to fold the bottom pieces up or down, I'm not sure. We'll see in a second. Let's start with up. And we're going to glue them on later. Let's put our arc aside for now. Right, this is going to be our temple. We're going to make our own temple. So you'll need to, this is going to be the front of it. You can colour that part in. And then we need to cut out a few pieces. So cutting along the solid lines. This one's going to be our base, our foundation, where we're going to build our temple. Cutting along this solid line. This is the back, and now we need to cut out this window. Quick little bit of tricky cutting. So fold your page in half so you can give it a little snip to start it off. And then we'll cut out that shaded box, which is going to be the window. We haven't done any tricky cutting for a few weeks. All right, there we go. This is the back, and this is the front. Now, we need to glue these together, these two. So we've got our foundation of the temple here, and now we've got the front of the temple and the back of the temple. Now we need to glue these together. You can see here's a gluing space, but you need to make sure when you're gluing that the dotted lines along the bottom of this piece line up with the dotted lines along the bottom of this piece. Let's do some gluing. All right, careful gluing, lining things up. Okay, now we need to do some folding to make our temple. So all the dotted lines we need to fold and fold. Actually, maybe fold it the other way. Better. Fold. Fold. And that's going to be a gluing space, I'm thinking. Fold it the other way. Okay. Now, we're going to glue that in just a second, but before we do, I want to fold up these ones along the bottom because that's the tabs that we're going to glue it onto the bottom with. So there's lots of folding and then we'll get on to lots of gluing. Okay, they're all up. Now we're going to fold this, this, this and this. try and glue our temple in place. Okay, I'm gluing. Glue on my table. Okay, here's our temple. We've got, this is the front, window in the back, and now we're going to glue it onto our foundation. So, I think it actually works if we fold these down. If you need to rip the tabs a little, that's okay. So, here's the, alright, so the front of the temple is going to be right next to the writing. Can you see that there on the bottom of the page? And we're going to glue this in place along all of these bits around the outside, okay? So you'll be left with 2 spaces inside, these ones here, and that's for the ark. Might actually put that in first. So I'm going to glue the ark together so that it sits flat, and it's a double-sided ark. And then we're going to glue the base on. Here's our ark glued in place on the temple. Right, now let's put our temple on. I've put glue all around the outside. So we just line up all these tabs that we've folded up. That one needs to go around there. It's practically perfect. Maybe ever so slightly crooked, but you know, I think it's okay. Here it is. We've got our temple, and inside you can see the ark. But like on our last craft, we know that you couldn't just walk into the temple and see the ark. There was a curtain in place. So that's what we're going to do next. Now you can use some paper if you like, but I've actually got a piece of fabric that I'm going to use as my curtain. So you'll need a skewer, and using your skewer, before you start threading your curtains on, let's carefully make a hole in the side of our temple in front of where the ark is. So I'm pushing my skewer all the way through very carefully. So that's going to be my curtain rod. How am I going to get the curtain on and get it back through there? Okay. Now, we need to, this is going to be a little bit tricky. All right, I've pulled the curtain rod all the way through. Now I'm going to weave it in and out of my paper or my fabric, or if you like, you can fold, if you've got paper, you can fold it like we did on our last craft. That makes it easy to get the skewer through. Putting my fabric on backwards. Starting again. Right, I'm threading my fabric onto my curtain rod. On it goes, on it goes. Now I'm going to flip it in there. I'm going to spread it out along here. Push it back a little bit further so I can get this end through. Here we go. I've got a curtain hanging in front of my ark. Now, to keep this safe, I'm going to cut the pointy end off, and I'm going to cut a bit more than the pointy end off. I'm going to cut it up close to the temple. I hope. Maybe get a grown-up to help you with this cutting of sticks. There we go. Now, so my curtain doesn't fall out, I've got a little bit of blue tack here, and I'm just going to stick the blue tack on the edges of the stick to hold it in place. So here is our temple. Solomon built a special temple where God would be with his people in a special way. here's our temple all finished. Now that's some pretty impressive craft right there. Well guys, I hope you have fun making those crafts or doing the worksheets if that's what you prefer to do. Don't forget to tell your parents the story that we learnt today and keep practicing your memory verses. And send me in a video of yourself. I'll see you next week. Bye.